Amazon's international markets, should sellers expand or focus on the US? So, according to Scott Needham, Amazon doesn't disclose revenue for individual international markets, but collectively they represent a significant portion of sale. While expanding globally, especially in Europe and Japan, can offer new opportunities and regulatory challenges and language barriers make it complex. For Amazon seller, the key question is whether to diversify into smaller markets or not. So that's definitely a question. But what I really liked here is, or surprised me, I should say, is that Japan has moved into second place, at least in Smart Scout's numbers. So he says that Smart Scout scanned the top millions of products, and this is the market size that they got. So this may differ a little bit from what others have put it out there, because most people put Germany, I believe, in second. But according to Smart Scout's data, Japan is in second place at 55 billion.
I'd be curious on this. I think this is huge if it's true. Also, just from a population perspective, right? Because, I mean, realistically speaking, seeing Amazon blow up as much as it has in Japan would be, really, really big overall. I mean, Japan is, a huge market to tap into on top of the fact of, Germany. A large reason that is or has been number two is because it can fulfill to so many of the European countries, whereas Japan, it's not, right? It's just Japan. So the fact that a single realistic country has kind of overtaken into spot two is really, really big. I would expect Japan to continue over the next few years growing. I would imagine it probably caps out somewhere in the range of 150 billion. Just from population size and ability to actually overtake market. It's more interesting to me because I would love to see the comparison of how large the Amazon Japan market is to other vendors with inside Japan, right? So what percentage of the overall Japanese market does Amazon own for e-commerce at this point? And like how much more does it have to grow? But it is really cool to see this just from that aspect of alone for years, Germany has been number two, if not United Kingdom, right?
So to answer a couple of your questions there, before we started, I mentioned that I just did a podcast with Gary Huang about selling on Amazon Japan. And he was saying that Amazon is the number one e-commerce platform that the Japanese people like to use. So it's definitely growing quickly. The population of Japan is about 36% of the population of the United States. So you were very close, Noah, because if they got 36% of the size of the U.S. market, you'd be at $155.88 billion in sales. So right now, they're only at about 12%, 13%, but it looks like they're growing quick.
Look, am I ever going to get an exact number on the dot? Probably not. But do I know sub 5% of most numbers? I think I can usually get there.
There you go. What are your thoughts, Ritu?
Yeah, so I used to live in Japan. I lived there for 17 years. So I kind of I've seen kind of Amazon grow slowly and take over Rakuten. So the takeover actually happened in the middle of the pandemic. Before that, Amazon was smaller than Rakuten. And funny enough, both Rakuten and Amazon were established at nearly the same time in the late 90s. So they've been around for 25 years or so. And this shift actually happened because of their logistics and just how, during the pandemic, they were the ones that kind of won a lot of market share because it was easy for the people to order from the comfort of their homes and were able to get packets very quickly and so on. So that's when Amazon started becoming big. But the thing is, there's a certain category or set of categories that sell better on Amazon than on Rakuten. So Rakuten happens to be more attractive to the older demographic because it's a native platform. It's a Japanese platform, and so there's a bigger kind of trust value associated with Rakuten, and
Okay.
it's not going anywhere. Like when you want to buy something high quality or more expensive, you go to Rakuten. You don't go to Amazon. Amazon is kind of mentally reserved for sub $50 type of purchases. And by the way,
Okay.
Japan and China are kind of very close in their trade relations, and Japanese people do not mind buying Chinese products. In fact,
Mhm.
the dollar store Daiso is like everywhere, and it's basically very popular. Most small items are purchased at that dollar store. Um, However, another trend that's happened recently is around the younger generation, so the Gen Zs and the millennials. They have their own platforms, and it's crazy how some of those people they are invisible on Amazon. They don't buy on Amazon at all because they have their own kind of Gen Z stores, and and there's so many of them, like 10, 15. So it depends on who you're targeting, and given that Japan's population tends to be older, there's still that balance between Amazon and Rakuten. But
Mm.
as this older generation starts to decline, there's going to be other channels as well that pick up, including Line, which is crazy how Line is integrated so well into
Mhm.
everybody's lives in Japan. So yeah, it's just
Yeah.
interesting that Japan actually moved up from number 4 to number 2 there in the data.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. I would say if anybody from Japan is listening to this, keep that split between Rakuten and Amazon. The competition is a good thing. We need more of that here in the United States. So definitely a good thing to see the competition.
Agree.
Yeah, it's what are your guys' thoughts on selling in these other marketplaces versus doubling down in the United States?
It depends on how large you are, right? That's always going to be my biggest thing. I think going global is great for brands that, one, have the cash flow to afford it, and two, who are already kind of tapped out where they, whichever marketplace they're in, right?
Mhm.
Of course, you can always continue somewhat growing on Amazon for the most part, right? You can always become huge and really, really dig into the US market. But if you're have the cash flow and capability to expand into the global market, there's next to no reason not to, right? You're essentially just leaving sales or potential sales on the table, especially in this day and age. I mean, you can find an agency, you can find a consultant, a VA, anything, even if you don't know, uh, even if you don't know the marketplace for someone else who does. If that makes sense. So
Mhm.
always going to be something I encourage,
Mhm.
but there is a certain level of, if you're failing within one market, try and make sure you're succeeding in that market before you move into another one.
Yep, for
Mhm.
sure.
I I agree. I agree with Noah that you first establish yourself in whatever market you are, and then talk about or think about expanding. And there's an advantage to doing that because you're only kind of working once on your product and your listings, and you want to just maybe amortize that over several markets and take that advantage. There's two other little things that I wanted to mention. First of all, when it comes to let's say Japan, there's also the proximity to the supply chain. Like how close are they? Typically, the lead times between Japan and China, so China and Japan, are they can be as low as 2 weeks. So if you're going to be low on inventory, it's the distance between China and Japan is it helps with quick replenishment of goods,
Sure.
and that lead time alone can give you huge advantages when it comes to, like, just cash flow, just from a cash flow perspective, as well as just protecting yourself from inventory, stockouts and things like that. So depending on where you're sourcing, that's another reason for kind of thinking about these other markets. If you're sourcing from Asia, then yes, some Asian markets will make sense. If you're sourcing from India, then India might make sense. And the other thing would be the product type. Like, what types of products do you sell, and are they a good fit for these other markets or not? A lot of people
Yeah.
don't do the right research into their product market fit, and then they kind of make that mistake of just jumping in and then realizing that it's not selling. So I think there's something to be said about that research upfront. I mean, we used to do product market fit analysis for for US brands wanting to expand to Japan, and it was amazing what kind of products you know we had to kind of audit. In some cases, those concepts don't exist in Japan. In some cases, those sizes won't fit in a house, or it's just a concept that you don't have, like a baby shower. There is no baby shower in Japan, so any products related to that big keyword or around that is not going to work. So I would say it's a little bit of like sourcing, as well as the category type as well, when it comes to where you want to sell.
Yeah, one example that Gary gave on the podcast was if you sell anything related to cooking stuff in the oven, is not going to go well in Japan because they typically don't have ovens. So, that whole market pretty much gets exploded over there. So don't send your turkey roaster over to Japan and think that it's going to sell well over there. It's definitely not. But yeah. It's I like the idea of expanding into these other markets, but you have to look into all the complications and translations and things like that. And like you said, Noah, make sure you have your home market locked down, maximized, and then start looking at these other markets is probably the best solution.
Yeah, and categories are always just going to play a huge part, like you said. Especially like supplement, that's always one that people have a horrible time with, primarily because the US
Sure.
market is much more available to be able to sell like whatever supplement you want. But most other World Health Organizations and everything restrict a lot of different supplements. So the amount of times I've heard someone say, my product is ineligible to be sold in Canada. What do I do? And I'm like, okay, what do you sell? And they're like, oh, XYZ supplement. I'm like, nothing, unless you want to try and start petitioning the Canadian Health Board to allow it to be sold there. Like, so it's one big thing you always have to think about is, what is your product type? What are you actually trying to sell? Is it even, relevant to other markets realistically?
Yep. Absolutely.